Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? We're going to have a really special guest with us here in just a minute. If you're new here, you guys are going to find a community, not an audience. And we have kitchen table just top discussions here, the kinds of things people need to know with the people that they need to hear them from. So we're going to have an amazing testimony here in just a minute. So I want to make sure that everybody double checks that you are subscribed. We are experiencing insane censorship, guys, and deplatforming. They're just removing people's subscriptions if they're not on the platform every single day. So make sure that you are subscribed. Make sure that you are plugged in over on whatsupcanada.org and lgm.news. And without further ado, we're going to bring on our guest here, Mr. Louis Fontaine. Some folks out there might recognize him. I'm kind of betting that most people will not. One of the things that Louis and I were talking about just before the show was this communication and information void between Quebec and the rest of the country, literally. And so I was very excited when I was able to connect with Mr. Dennis Rancourt, and he was gracious enough to connect Mr. Fontaine and myself so that we could get a voice from inside of Quebec that, Louis, you're doing some extraordinarily courageous stuff in a time where Canada needs to see people doing courageous things, and I want to commend you on so many levels. First of all, for all of the things that you have done, and we'll get to that in just a second. But just the fact that you are out here right now, still doing what's right, not what's easy, and this kind of sets up how I came across the inspiration. And I was mentioning to you earlier that I was really excited by getting a chance to talk to you simply because of something unfortunate in your life. But I read about a Quebec lawyer that had tendered his resignation and submitted an open letter to the Quebec Bar Association, and my head kind of went so on that, for those that didn't see the testimonies with the NCI in Quebec, you were a part of that. But now you are going to be a part of discussion nationwide, even though most of us may not have seen what happened in Quebec at the NCI hearings. So, Louis, you say you like to have questions rather than just to be left to your own devices. So give us a little start for folks out there, where you are, where you come from, and you kind of set the stage over the last number of years, because you don't get to a position of resigning from the Bar Association on a whimsy.
No, well, hi Wayne. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the very nice introduction. And I apologize in advance for my broken English. Of course, French is my mother tongue, so I apologize. So I've been a lawyer for about 11 years. I got into the profession in 2013, and that's when I took an oath. I guess you have the same in Western Canada. So when we enter the profession, we have to make a solemn oath in which we swear that we will act with honesty and with respect of fundamental justice, and we will be impartial, and we will be independent, and so on and so forth. And it didn't start in 2020. It started before my questioning, and I realized, yeah, I mean, there are like stronger forces we have to submit to. We are not, saying that lawyers are independent is not the case. So I understood that quite rapidly in my career. And then 2020 hit, and that was a really big shock for me. At that time I was working for a big Canadian company, a distributor of groceries and fuel. Maybe I'm not going to name the company, but you know that company, a very large company, listed on the stock exchange. Anyways, and I was seeing things that were, I don't know, I was really mesmerized by what I was seeing, like everybody jumping into the wagon, like, okay, let's put plastic, what do you call it, plexiglass? I know, the plastics they put in grocery stores and everything. And everybody was very excited to do all that. And, let's stop selling lotteries because, people get sick from, I guess, touching the lottery tickets. I don't know. And I was seeing lots of stuff which didn't make sense. And, that's how it all started. And then I got involved with, I participated in a legal action against the Quebec government to have the mandates being declared unconstitutional or
Great.
not reasonable. And I don't want to give myself too much credit. I just worked for a few months with another lawyer who was in charge of the case. But anyways, that didn't work out. So the courts basically decided, the Quebec Superior Court decided, okay, so the fact that there was a serious threat to the health of the population, that has become judicial notice. Okay, and this whole debate is just theoretical, since the state of emergency has ended. There's no need to spend money and efforts and resources on deciding on this case, so they will just never hear the case. That was another big disappointment. And I've also tried to defend member of professional associations who are being sued by their professional, associations. We call them orders here, professional orders.
Okay.
So basically, anyone who went against the official narrative, they were persecuted here in Quebec. And not a single, to my knowledge, not a single one of these professionals, I'm talking about nurses, medical doctors, chemists, chiropractors, you name it, they either pleaded guilty or were found guilty. There is not one single exception in the whole province, to my knowledge. I mean, it's been terrible here.
I'm glad you stopped there, because that was kind of where my questioning was going. You had to have been looking at how over the top this was all going in Quebec, and looking outside of Quebec and comparing notes, talking with legal teams outside of Quebec. This must have all been ringing really, really strange to all of you guys. But you hit on a key point. There is no, in my mind, there is no scientific probability available that would say 100% of the cases would only be going one direction. Yeah, that's just. But the term that makes it all possible, and that was one of the things that keyed me into your letter, was you were one of the few people that brought up the term judicial notice. And we've been had some other guests on the show in cases out west, and it's the same thing that they're fighting, is ultimately at the end of the day, how can they say it's judicial notice when the facts aren't even in yet? So
that's a very good question. And I actually last year did a conference, a public conference in Quebec City. That was my topic, because that decision from the Superior Court, that was in May of 2023, okay, where the Superior Court decided that the serious threat to the health of the population was judicial notice, and nobody could seriously question it. And remember, I had just participated in the NCI in May.
Mhm.
Okay, so the month after, I read the decision, and the judge says there's no way anybody with a right mind that can question this. It is judicial notice, and I had just myself questioned under oath scientists and doctors from Quebec, Canada, the US, France, and I'm reading this, and I thought, okay, I gotta, I gotta push and try to do a public conference about it. So I've tried to explain to the public what's the gravity of having a court say this is judicial notice. Judicial notice is something you cannot question. And there's something I wanted to say. Okay, so how does something become judicial notice? Well, it is something which, everybody knows. But how do we get our information? You know the answer, Wayne. We get it from the media. So judicial notice is created by the media. And I think I should have insisted more on that when I did my conference. I don't think I insisted enough on that point.
Well, it's
But it is created by the media.
the
So
consensus of the media was hijacked the courts, and how I, from my side of the fence, not, my role is to question, challenge, and hold their feet to the fire. So I describe it as having captured the judiciary. How can the media narrative capture the judiciary when I have interviewed 50 of the world's top vaccinologists, immunologists, cardiologists, the full gamut? And my the response to that is have me removed from every social media public square in existence that they have leverage over, to the point of being completely underwater. So this when you bring up judicial notice, I got a lot to say about what they deem as consensus. uh, uh, yeah, so that's one that really triggers me, and here we are still, now, where this is the precedent that they are operating by. Cases are still being fought, they're still being started, on this principle, but yet we have literally AstraZeneca and these companies backtracking on everything that they said was safe and effective. But yet there still doesn't seem to be a movement in the media or the judiciary.
yeah, so in my letter, I also wrote about the division of power, between the legislative, executive, judicial, and and the media branch of power. And that's also, very, very worrying, because you have all these branches just walking in lockstep in the same direction, and implementing a plan, which, as I wrote in my letter, which is not ours, which is not mine in any case. And they're all walking in lockstep. So the media says, okay, there's this deadly virus. Okay, and then the courts, yeah, there was a deadly virus. And of course, the executive, the legislative, they're just all following the same, what you call it, the same playbook.
This exactly the same playbook. And so a couple of things that you mentioned there that I in what you were saying so far is when you mentioned the plexiglass, the social distancing, my first thought was, and that honestly to me was the very first big red flag, was after 20 years in marketing and design and campaign programs, there is no way in the world that every print shop, propaganda magazine, and organization in the country has all of the paraphernalia, stickers, decals, flyers, handouts, all of these kinds of things. A campaign like that takes hundreds of millions of dollars and a minimum of a year to develop, but boom, right out of the chute, we had all of it. And so for me, that was first big red flag. And the second one being my career before that was a breathing air specialist, and they were trying to tell me that I had to put a mask on. They'd have thrown me in jail for trying to do that when I worked as, in my career field before that. So for me, everything was really wrong right out of the gate. And so the danger that I see coming is, without addressing this judicial notice factor, they're setting us up for it again. And they're making it up at will. And you addressed some of these things, because to me, I saw those things as the transfer of wealth, or the only essential services were the companies and corporations that were listed on the retirement portfolios of all of the unions across the country, and the public sector being the largest thereof. So all of their union retirement funds are tied up in the Costco's, the only places we were allowed to shop and spend. So this was the direction that I was seeing this entire thing come through. But I also had a great patience for understanding that the wheels of justice move much slower than that 24/7, 365 world that we live in right now. But this is something that we really need to get a grip on, because that digital capture, that media capture of the judiciary and everything else is incredibly dangerous if they want to do this again.
Yeah, so they're actually captured by finance, in my opinion, and that was another red flag for me. I'm a bit interested in finance, so checking the stock market and managing my small portfolio, and so I was reading a financial publication. I'm reading it every week. And they talk about this, threat from China, and and actually, what they were talking about before this, supposed or alleged virus was what was it? Yeah, it was the trade war between the U.S. and China. That was what was in every publication before. So trade war, anyways, and then this hits, and I see like the panic and everybody's selling. But of course, some companies were just, Clorox, the ones they make the hand sanitizer, they were just jumping. And I don't know, I knew something was going on, and I knew lots of people were profiting of this, because when the market is stable, you don't traders, they don't profit much. But when there's a lot of volatility, they're having lots of fun. So
That's the wild west for them.
Yeah, so I was thinking, and actually that publication I'm reading, it's called Value Line. They're based in New York City. They've existed for several decades, and they usually have market updates, every daily market updates. So when I wake up in the morning, I go check, and okay, what's the update for today? And they stopped doing it for several days. And I was like, what are they doing? and then I figured out, I'm like, oh, okay, they're like trading like crazy and making millions every day. They don't want to spend like 20 minutes to write their daily update, because they're trading like crazy, selling options and puts and calls and buying and selling. That's what they were doing. They were just having a good time and making, I was about to swear, making a lot of, a very big lot of money. So that was a huge red flag also.
Part and parcel that that's what it was. It was a wealth extraction, and the money was really good for a small group of people that were either in on it, and if you weren't or immediately questioned it, you had to be canceled and punished immediately, and it didn't. The more ethical you were, the more you must be punished. Was kind of where it got to. But you're 100% right. Follow the money. Mikomo, who benefits, right? It's this is something that we still, I don't think, have anybody looking at this here in Canada. And I'm sure if you felt that there was an opportunity to pursue this through the ability within the justice system, you probably wouldn't have resigned from the bar, and you'd still be fighting in that capacity. I mean, that's why you got into that profession, was to fight in that capacity. So, where do you see it that we're at here now, and what in I mean, we can talk about all of the different institutions that are captured, but the one that is the most troubling to me is the judiciary. Without law and order, we have anarchy, or what do we have?
Well, I've changed my mind about anarchy.
I'm not really a big fan of it myself,
So
but
because anyways, I understood that there was also a campaign to disinform us about what anarchy really is. But maybe that's another topic. But I've heard about anarchy, and it's just not having a ruler profiting from the slaves below. It's not having rules, so it's not having a monarch, a ruler, a king. But it doesn't mean it is it is chaos everywhere, and fires on the streets and violence. No, anarchy, that's not what it is. But they made us think that's what anarchy is. But anyways, you have invited maybe the first and only anarchist ex-lawyer.
well, you're not wrong, because and this is something that it will be an amazing conversation, and we're going to end up being forced to have more of these conversations across the country as to how do we want to be governed moving forward, because there are things that are happening that are going to force those conversations, whether we like them or not. But it's also important to address what for I've also come to understand that my, generalization of the word anarchy and anarchist it has been hijacked as well. And how and why is important, because that was a part of the manipulation and the misinformation. These antifada organizations that gave a branding to and a misrepresentation to what those words and what true definition is. And I think that we're at a point in time where our vocabulary matters now more than it ever did before, because there is the scrutiny of millions on every word that you say, not just the people in the room around you anymore. And we have to kind of learn, learn the rules of the new language that they seem to be squeezing down us, and changing the rules of what things mean, and what they are. But uh you know I appreciate your the understanding and bringing this up, because it brings up the one single point. We have no say in, we are not a democracy as long as there is a notwithstanding clause on the rulers that govern us. Anytime the king over there across the pond still wants to say no to us Canadians, he will say no. So we have absolutely no more ability to our determination of your self-determination in the future than the slaves do ultimately. And they're proving this to us through the capture of the establishments right now. So a true understanding of what anarchy means, I think, is a relevant conversation these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think I answered your question, but don't hesitate if you want to interrupt me or have other questions. But it just reminded me that in my letter I did write. It's a short letter, but I've really tried to put everything in a very short letter. So it's like boom, boom, and I wrote, the fact is our society is neither free nor democratic, because what's the criteria when so if someone challenges the constitutionality of let's say a mandate, okay, there's a test, we call it the Oakes case,
The
comes
Oaks
from
test. The Oaks
Oakes
test.
test. Exactly,
Yep.
exactly. Okay, so the court has to find if the um, um, if the sorry, I'm losing my Latin. If the attack on our fundamental rights was justified under Section 1 of the Charter. And what does it say is the reasonable limits in a free and democratic society. So, and we learned that in school, and we're just like, yeah, that's fine. Okay, there's the Oakes test, and it's all well and good and fine. But what it means, if you think about it, it means that you're free, but just to the level permitted by the limits of a free society. It doesn't make any sense, no?
You're 100% right. And I was having a discussion this afternoon where uh, a very conservative minded person was absolutely infuriated with Pierre Poilievre saying, I am going to make Canada the freest country on the planet. Did Jesus become God, Pierre? Because you don't grant my freedom. How do you grant? I am free. How do you grant me freedom? If that isn't an indicator that both sides of this bird are very, very sick and this charade it needs an alternative solution, I don't know what is, because that doesn't sound to me like things are going to get better. It just sounds like we get a new dictator.
Yeah, and in Quebec and I think it's the same at the federal level or at the provincial level in the West or in English Canada. Um, every single political party just went along, and there was no opposition. And well, I'm speaking mostly about Quebec. I don't know the situation in every other province, but in Quebec, they were again all walking in lockstep, and absolutely no debate. And whether you're Parti Québécois, liberal, conservative,
Because there's
so-called.
one ring that binds them. There is one policy that binds them. That is the UNSDA. They have all contractually obligated themselves as parties to the UNSDA. So the only thing they're actually competing over is who gets our purse strings and our money printing ability to fulfill the checklist that's set before them in those developments. So this is why Quebec and the rest of the country alike are seeing our policies crafted in Geneva versus in Quebec or in Canada. And it's just to varying degrees of how far the fire has burned the house down this far between Quebec and Canada and the rest of Canada. And that divide, it's like there's this disconnect between Quebec and Canada. The rest of Canada, everybody thinks that our problem and our fight is unique, and it is really not. It's that gap in communication has really been weaponized to our detriment when we need to all be pulling on the same rope, the same water lines, but we're not. So it's unfortunate that we're seeing the results, but it's not coming from our own policymakers.
Yeah, and we were discussing just before we went on air, this fake division which was created between Quebec and other provinces. So I think it was 100% manufactured. So when I was in high school, for example, we had this history teacher, and he would tell us how the English were, bloodthirsty bastards, and and I really I really came to hate English and and Anglophones. And it took a few years, and then I traveled when I was a young adult, and I realized, whoa, since I've learned English, I can communicate with people from all over the world. I traveled to Israel, to Egypt, to France, to Spain, and if I didn't speak English, of course, I could not have traveled and communicated as easily with all these wonderful people. And I realized, okay, so that's all bullshit. we're all the same people. We happen to speak different languages, but of course I have to master English if I want to be able to read English authors and scientific studies, and that's really helped me during the fake pandemic. So I was able to go read by myself the scientific studies, which of course are all in English. So anyways, this division is absolutely manufactured. So the real division is between us, the working people, and the working class, and the dominant classes, the predatory classes, I like to call them. That's the only real division which exists. The other ones are manufactured and 100% fake.
We all read about divide and conquer in foreign wars and foreign lands, and yet we are the most susceptible to divide and conquer in our own country, and that's literally what has held us there. For me, my realization with it, and I was very much like you, and I'm glad we get a chance to have this discussion, because I having grown up in Alberta, something we talked about. The first Trudeau in office really devastated our province with the Energies Act, and created a deep-seated hatred for anything to do with Quebec, and the propaganda that they used on us. And then came the referendum in '97. All of these things were stoked to
95.
create. Or pardon me, 95, were to create this manufactured division and hatred. And for me, it was shattered eternally on the first convoy in 2019, when I looked into Francophone and Westerner alike, and the suffering and pain and hope was exactly the same. And that was when I realized, that all of the problems, because that was what I was there for, was to cover and watch the protests of the problems. And I had to realize that they weren't just being manufactured for us. Everything was being manufactured. All of the problems were being manufactured for all of the provinces. And this is how they keep us from solving it, was by weaponizing this communication, weaponization of propaganda, and pitting us, making us hate each other. And that was something that I'll forever be ashamed of, that I spent, wasted 30 years of my life hating some of the most beautiful people, and refusing to go and see some of the most beautiful places in our country. That is what diversity is our strength means, not this fraudulent terminology that they weaponized to cover the biggest human trafficking ring in the universe, in my opinion. But very much so. So I'm really grateful to have this, to be able to have this conversation and clear the air on that, guys. We have to stop looking at each other, in the lights that they want us to, because that's exactly what they feed on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what now, Louis? What now? What, and I hate to say it, but now you're kind of one of us. Now what? Because we're all in that same boat, and so I for years represented John Q, working uneducated public, asking people like you, now what? Now you've left that that forum, and you're like you said, you're one of us now. Now what? Now what do we do?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't have the answer. I'm always asked, like, what are you going to do now? And it's a difficult question. So, well, at least I will have more freedom of speech, because when you're part of a professional association or professional order, as we call them, well, you're always, as we say, I don't know if you have the same expression, we're walking on eggs. We have,
Handcuffed. Yep.
so we have to be very careful. You cannot say this, you cannot say that, you cannot go against the narrative. So now I have more freedom, so that's really good. And also I have the clear conscience of not being part of this, because I always felt, okay, well, I'm trying to defend some clients who, try to question the narrative, and I'm trying to participate in a legal action against the government. But there was always this burden of being part of this system. Actually, there's a feeling I had a few months before quitting. So I was representing an assistant nurse, a nurse. And at one point, I realized that they wanted him to have a lawyer, so the whole process would appear to be more legitimate. And I knew for sure, I had the very deep, it was very clear in my mind that he would be condemned. He would be found guilty no matter what I would do. And anything I would do, they would twist it and use it against him and, well, me, I guess. And I told him, you know what? If I were you, and he allows me to talk about this, maybe I'm not going to mention his name, but he told me you can talk about it as much as you want. And he was recently found guilty, as I predicted. And I really felt I'm just being used to give legitimacy to this process, which is biased and which is, like completely biased. And I've read the decision which was made in his case very recently, and I mean, I've actually reread it this morning because I have a friend who wrote about it, and I just wanted to give him some input. And the tribunal actually wrote that my former client has said or had, what's the word? He didn't say it, but he made it look like
Implied.
him. Yeah, exactly. So if you go read the decision, the judge, well, the disciplinary tribunal, I don't know what it's called in English, but disciplinary tribunal, I guess, they wrote that he either said or implied that, and then there's lots of bullets, like, and one of them is that there is a chip in the vaccines, a microchip or nanochip, whatever, in the vaccines. But I know he's never said that. He's actually said the opposite. And I don't know. And so that's written in the decision, and that was picked by a local, well, by one of the biggest newspaper in Montreal, the Journal of Montreal, Journal de Montréal. And they just copied what they found in the decision, pasted it in the article, and the poor guy, he's being condemned by the judiciary. I said it in another interview in French. He was given the first, hit by the judiciary, and he's being finished off by the media or something similar.
It's literally, to me, it's like, I compare this, some people say the Matrix. I think it's more like Avatar, where this digital universe is trying to control reality, and they've very much weaponized. I can't say everything and everybody, that's not the case, but in for those that are brave enough to fight back, they've figured out how to make the process the punishment. So they engage in lawfare until you are expired, and you just you get bit by bit by bit by bit, canceled until all of a sudden there's nothing left, and you're gone. And unfortunately, that's the norm. It's no longer the exception. And I read a quote the other day, and it's been really been blowing my, I can't get it out of my head. It's from Frederick Bastiat in 1850, and I see this. And in 1850, he wrote, "The only proper purpose of law in a free society is to prevent injustice. It is not to organize society. Anytime the law, which is force, organizes trade, religion, education, or any facet of society, it destroys freedom and justice by using force." And that's where we're at here, where our justice society is literally engineering and structuring society based on how dare you versus uh, facts, information, debate, discussion, expression. And now we're heading into some uh, absolute insanities with things like Bill C-63, which I'm afraid has every possibility of passing just by the desperation of the NDP and the Liberals to make as much social change as they can. And so we're there. We're there.
Yeah, I will give you another example in Quebec province for your for the people watching us who probably have never heard about these stories. So I have a colleague and a friend who's who was unfortunately because he's been dismissed, who was a tenured teacher, professor at Laval University, that's in Quebec City. So he was a tenured professor at the Faculty of Medicine there in Quebec City. And he was recently, it's been just a couple of weeks, he's been dismissed. So when you're a tenured professor, it's you got a job for life usually.
Yeah.
And he was dismissed. And you know what they did? I think it was 1 or 2 years ago. A law was enacted in Quebec province. I think it's law number 12. I can't remember. And it's a law about, you cannot make this up. It's a law about academic freedom. So the legislative branch voted a law to put in writing and put it very official that professors in Quebec have the liberty, the freedom to discuss, to challenge any dogma. That's written. Question any dogma. And then they write.
Then if you do it.
No, but then there's it's not a footnote, but it's written, in accordance with, the limits, reasonable limits of the, the community or something similar, like what they do with YouTube, or, you're free to post, but
you're free, but
you're free, but. So we have reached this point in Quebec, and I think it's the same, pretty much everywhere in the world. Is we have the legislative branch enacting laws to apparently protect freedom of speech and freedom of thought and freedom of opinion and everything, but in effect they're restricting our freedom using laws about freedom. I mean, what's going on?
I'd read in the Freedom Index that this year 54 countries had lost a number of freedoms, measurable freedoms. And when you really think about that, it's a very small portion of the world that actually has any freedoms to lose. So if 54 countries are losing freedoms of the free countries on the planet, and comes down to again that lockstep thing, and there's a lot to that discussion. There's a lot to the money side of that. You're right, it's all about the money. It's just been addressed that the biggest accounting firm on the planet was McKinsey, whatever it was, had fraudulently manufactured the DEI data in order to establish this diversity, equity, and inclusion (ESG) financial system into the markets, so that they could literally manipulate markets on the stock exchange. So you got you've got the accountants in Geneva dreaming up the policy that's coming to Canada. Of course, they're going to make money on the markets, because they're going to force people into this DEI ESG compliance, and we don't get a say about it. Our politicians are the meat muppets for enforcement for those guys. This dismissal of our elected officials at these requests, civil requests, to this point of addressing some of these UN policies being invoked on us, or Trudeau using literally the notwithstanding clause to re-engineer Canada at the Geneva behest. It's going to take an extreme amount of awakening yet. I'm grateful for getting this far. I'm a lot more inspired than I was 3 years ago. We've got people like you joining the ranks of, hey, what's going on here? I'm not going to say the fringe minority, because we are absolutely the majority in my belief. It's just the little guys behind the curtains that we got to keep pulling harder on those curtains.
Yeah, and you asked me about the future, or maybe my future or our future. So my decision to quit the Quebec Bar Association is, I don't want to give them to consent to having the power to rule what I'm to have power over me. So it's the logic is, I don't want to give them my money. I don't want to give them authority over me. Like I'm my own. I want to be the one who makes decision for myself. So what I'm saying is, well, obviously I'm not saying everyone should do what I did, but let's, theoretically, if we all did what I did, then the College of Physicians doesn't have any power anymore. The bar doesn't have any power anymore. Our government doesn't have any power anymore. So if we look at what the Professional Association of Physicians, of medical doctors, did in the last 4 years, I mean, it's not like there could be a reform to improve things, or no. I mean, they went way too far.
Yeah.
And I'm also part of a group here in Quebec, a group of doctors and scientists, and they wrote many letters to the College of Physicians, and they were hoping something will change, and maybe they will answer them, and they will change their views about so-called vaccines and everything. But no, they're just ignoring. And what I'm saying is, well, maybe if you want to help people's health, maybe that's not within the profession.
Well, there's when something is beyond repair, you build something new, right? I mean, that's just instinct. When when your wagon breaks, you get a new wagon, right? And this management system of Canada needs a complete overhaul. And the longer we spend time within that, these systems that we know are beyond repair. And that's not to say that all doctors are bad, but the system is destroyed. There can be no amnesty. They can't just wipe it off and say they're sorry with what they have done. And we need to move past some of these systems, but we have to accept first our individual responsibility. And I heard it described a few years ago in the most simple of terms, and they're 100% right. I'm a huge advocate in that the highest jurisdiction in every land is the court of public opinion, because laws are only a set of rules agreed upon by a small number of people and then agreed upon to be lived by the greater majority. And if at any point in time the greater majority says, no, these rules, they don't serve or suit us anymore, they have every ability to adjourn the court of public opinion and remove said small group of individuals and make new rules. That's my understanding of how democracy should be and how we need to approach this. And again, to me, I'm a pretty simplistic guy. I'm not expecting miracles, but when all of the major parties are contractually obligated to the same Geneva lists, I have a problem with giving any amount of faith that they're going to fix any of the problems. So I'm far more interested in things like what Iceland did, for example. How do we build something new? Because the stuff that we got, that doesn't mean you tear up all of the roads and build new roads, but it's time to replace all of the management systems at all of the different institutions that have gone horribly sideways, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. If and I like the image. If it's broken, I mean, it's beyond repairable. I don't think we can fix.
I made an analogy to my friends today. It's like we elect these guys, we send them into parliament and tell them fix it and give them a rubber hammer. Fix it. That's the game.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good image.
So I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, expecting you to have any answers to all of it, but just to be able to have the a discussion like this is important. Lets people know that we're not alone across this country. Again, all of this suffering is manufactured. Again, it all comes from the same place. Now it's like how do we find the right things to agree upon to actually fix it and get past this charade of believing that politics as it is right now can fix it. I don't believe that it can. So anytime you want to do something from inside of Quebec with the rest of us, you let me know, Louis. I'm your huckleberry.
Okay, yeah. And
So
when you spoke about the rules and the public opinion, you're right. So did you know that in Quebec we had a curfew? I think we were the only province with a curfew.
and it
And
was obscenely enforced to the using violence to enforce it. That to me gave me flashbacks to watching 1944, 43, 42 Germany documentaries. I hate to say it.
and it's as simple as that. It's people followed the orders. So of course there were no policemen on every. I mean, they could not keep us inside if they wanted to prevent us from getting outside. It's just people obeyed, and they were brainwashed by this false narrative, and they just obeyed. But all we need to do is just the next time and unfortunately I think they will do it again. So when they come up with a curfew or whatever restriction, or I mean, let's not comply.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I gotta be honest with you, when you guys were having those lockdowns, we weren't supposed to gather anywhere in the rest of the country either, but kind of just being in my nature, I was, giving underground town halls to 400 and 500 people at a time when they weren't supposed to be more than 4 or 5 people together at a time. So maybe the West is a little bit ahead of Quebecers on some of that level of rebellion, and maybe we can inspire each other through different ways to help end some of this insanity. Yeah, I want to be, incredibly respectful of your time, Louis. This has been really great having you on here. Last thoughts before I let you go. Things that you think people should or can do, or you know, uh, you know, places they
Uh,
can follow. What's your next fight? What do you want people to remember? Last thoughts.
what I want them to remember. Uh, well, so what motivated me to quit the bar was I actually went back to my oath and went back to my code of ethics, and I reread them, and I realized, well, no. If I want to act with integrity, and I want to act with honesty, and I'm in face of the big lie, and my code of ethics says you have to act with honesty, and I see the bar pushing the lie and saying, don't post on. And actually, before I quit, I went on their website and I checked, and they had this article saying, oh, be very mindful of what you put on social media, because we're very strict with disinformation. And so they are pushing the lie. um, you
100%.
know so what I'm saying is, if you come to that conclusion, and of course I'm for freedom, so do whatever you want, but if you come to, if you come to that conclusion that you cannot act with integrity within your profession or your occupation or whatever, well, maybe it's time for a change. So that's what I did, and I'm pretty sure the future for me and for the people who did something similar than I did is, I think the future is bright. So that's
I, I
that's my message.
I love the way you think, sir. I could not agree more. Indifference is only going to make guilt a certainty, and doing what's right in this time is harder than usual, perhaps, but it's what's necessary, and that's why I'm so grateful for having the opportunity to speak with people like you that do what's
Yeah.
right, not what's easy, and that's how we do better. That's how we show Canada that's better, and by continuing to live free and saying no. I'm just not doing it. I will not comply. So
Yeah, very simple. And and if I can, one more thing. Um, so I made the decision to have this letter translated, and I'm really happy we did, because I first published in French on the website of the association
yes,
I'm part of. Okay, and I did several interviews in French, maybe around 10 in the last couple of weeks. And then I decided with my friends, well, let's translate it, and let's have my story, you know, go, yeah, let's try to make my story known by Canadians, and who knows, Americans. And I'm really happy we did. And yeah, and back to the Quebec and English versus French thing, or nonsense. I think that's one of the reasons we Quebecers were persecuted as much as we were.
yes,
I think it's because we have been deliberately isolated. We've been told, if you speak English, you're going to lose your culture. That's bullshit. If you learn English, you're going to lose blah blah blah. French will disappear. No, French will probably not disappear. Just like Swedish hasn't disappeared, and Finnish or whatever. And and and, and they were able to manipulate us so much, because many Quebecers, they cannot watch the news. They cannot watch what's happening in the UK, what's happening in the US, what's happening in Florida, where there were basically no restrictions. So they were able to control us because of our ignorance. Well, again, it's a time-tested strategy. So my message would be to Quebecers and to Canadians, like let's just stop this bullshit division. We're all together in it. It's us against the predators. It's not us French Canadians between English Canadians. That's nonsense.
You're 100% right. It's the predators versus us, and a little bit of affirmation for you on this, Louis. My family came to Canada in like 1867. I still speak the language. I am Canadian. I'm not Anglo-Canadian. I'm not Franco-Canadian. I am Canadian. We need to lose all of the pronouns and unite under that and not fear. And maybe we can, maybe this was the first step in building some bridges where we can communicate more on this. I would love to invite you back. Seems like you might have a little bit of time on your hands, maybe. Come and share with us some of the things that we don't get to hear that are, because again, like you said, if had you not translated your letter to English and put it out there, we wouldn't have had this conversation. We wouldn't have reached thousands of people through this conversation. We wouldn't have been able to create some of that healing that's so desperately needed. We need to get rid of the tribalism, and this would be an amazing way to do that. So I'm so very grateful for your time today, my friend, and I hope we get to do this again really, really soon.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a pleasure, Wayne. Again, thanks for inviting me and sharing my story to every Canadian.
Well, I'm sure that you're going to get more inquiries. I've put your letter out there to the public as well, and I'll be publishing a written piece on this probably tomorrow. And I know that you're part of the family here now, and they will treat you as such because we have a community, not an audience, and I'm really proud of the way that they do things. They're a get it done kind of people. That's to me what being Canadian is all about. So pretty excited. So thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you again.
All right, guys, that was so much fun. I got so much out of that. I hope that really you guys do too. You see some of these things where we're left, Quebec he's really was right. Quebec, we were all hit with a whole lot of isolation, and that's exactly where they wanted us: beat down, demoralized, abused, confused, living in fear and terror. And they traumatized us, and they leveraged that language gap between us to facilitate that and to maintain that, and they do that to this day. So I hope that y'all get the same inspiration I did out of that discussion with Louis, and share this out and find the reasons to come together. There's all kinds of reasons to stay apart. But this is how we adjourn the court of public opinion for something greater, something more. So this is going to be the last show for probably a week or so, guys. This kind of came about last minute. Saturday was intended to be my last show for a week while I relocate and go through another adventure process. So anybody that thinks that it's a good time to help, it would be mostly appreciated. I'm going to spend my birthday on the road, so maybe buy me a coffee along the way. It'd be greatly appreciated. And that's it for tonight. I'm not sure exactly when next week I will be back, but stay mighty, my fellow hostages. I love y'all. See you next week sometime. Bye for now.